Right, quick apology note to Neil. This is chaos. Alright, welcome in, Kath, to possibly the last ever stream. Third time lucky. Neil, I will sort it after Bible hour. You rest up. And please don't hurt me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bible Hour. Either Audrey Assad kicked us or Disney kicked us, but there's a lawsuit coming to Park End which I'll forward on to Chris Cyril. So we'll just wait for the admin to find where I am because I'm moving around. I also can see that I'm glitching around now. Does that mean there's 2 streams active? Uh-oh, there better not be 2 streams active. I can see red lights flashing here. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in trouble with a capital T. Well, I'm in trouble. Thanks, bro. How many streams have we got going? Oh, it's just Bible Hour and then 4 minutes 30 of the of the Sunday one. I saw Neil in the car park today and he was like, don't you ever do that again. And Sam was like, Owen, it was chaos in our house last night. And now I'm glitching. Warning, the stream's current bitrate is lower than the recommended. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means. What's Rita doing? I'll find a way to blame Rita. Are we glitching still? I've asked Rita to turn off the TV just in case it's milking us. Keep going, thanks North Star. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the glitching might have been as my computer tried to shut down the Sunday stream and restart the new one. I better turn off my phone before Neil gets me. So, let's just back up a bit. It's 9:15. It's been the most disastrous start to any Bible Hour in 146 sessions. Disney, they're trying to sue us. Let's enjoy our last night of home before Neil gets Hannah. Disney got a hold of us. They booted me off live on air. And what happens then is I created a new stream and got to the final page. But there's this sneaky little drop-down menu. Whereas if you're not 100%, if you don't find that little small little menu somewhere on the screen, and it had flicked to the Sunday thing. So when I clicked go, it was on Sunday. So everything was in order apart from a tiny little drop-down box, which has to be on Bible Hour, which Neil walked me through a few times. And then told me about today in the car park in a semi-hostile manner. So my little intros have what film studio are we going to have to date? That's gone out the window. Audrey Assard's out the window. I'm out the window. Sue Roberts just got, I thought you'd eaten a poison cookie. I wish. By this time tomorrow, a poison cookie will be like strawberries and cream. Something I'll be desiring. After Neil gets me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to day 146. It seems like we're under a curse for stopping car park communion. I don't even know where we're at. Somewhere in Acts. Are we? Or are we in Leviticus? I don't even know anymore. I think we're going to start Acts 22. If we could just send our thoughts now past the chaos, the sewage, which has just spilled out of the Park End Studios. I didn't like that music anyway. It was loud and piercing. Sue Roberts, I turned the volume down on my computer to a pleasant level. Ladies and gentlemen, 17 minutes past 9. Let's see if we can finish Acts. I bet we can. No problem. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Brothers and esteemed fathers, Paul said, listen to me as I offer my defense. When they heard him speaking in their own language, the silence was even greater. Then Paul said, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, and I was brought up and educated here in Jerusalem under Gamaliel. As his student, I was carefully trained in our Jewish laws and customs. I became very zealous to honor God in everything I did, just like all of you today. So remember, he's addressing a hostile mob. And I persecuted the followers of the way, hounding some to death, arresting both men and women, and throwing them into prison. The high priest and the whole council of elders can testify that this is so, for I received letters from them to our Jewish brothers in Damascus, authorizing me to bring the followers of the way from there to Jerusalem in chains to be punished. As I was on the road approaching Damascus about noon, a very bright light from heaven suddenly shone around me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Incidentally he was persecuting the church, but Jesus is so connected to his church, it's like doing it to him. Who are you, Lord? I asked. And the voice replied, I am Jesus the Nazarene, the one you are persecuting. The people with me saw the light, but didn't understand the voice speaking to me. I asked, What should I do, Lord? And the Lord told me, Get up and go to Damascus, and there you will be told everything you are to do. I was blinded by the intense light and had to be led by the hand to Damascus by my companions. A man named Ananias lived there. He was a godly man, deeply devoted to the law and well regarded by all the Jews of Damascus. He came and stood beside me and said, Brother Saul, regain your sight. At that very moment, I could see him. Then he told me, the God of our ancestors has chosen you to know his will and to see the righteous one and hear him speak. For you are to be his witness, telling everyone what you have seen and heard. What are you waiting for? Get up and be baptized. Have your sins washed away by calling on the name of the Lord. After I returned to Jerusalem, I was praying in the temple and fell into a trance. I saw a vision of Jesus saying to me, Hurry, leave Jerusalem, for the people here won't accept your testimony about me. But Lord, I argued, they certainly know that in every synagogue I imprisoned and beat those who believed in you, and I was in complete agreement when your witness Stephen was killed. I stood by and kept the coats that they took off when they stoned him. But the Lord said to me, Go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles. The crowd listened until Paul said that word. Then they all began to shout, Away with such a fellow! He isn't fit to live! They yelled, threw off their coats, and tossed handfuls of dust into the air. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've heard about Jesus in your life, the apostles basically gave their lives to break out of Jerusalem with the message to the wider world. Like, we are in this story. The commander brought inside and ordered him lashed with whips to make him confess his crime. He wanted to find out why the crowd had become so furious. When they tied Paul down to lash him, Paul said to the officer standing there, Is it legal for you to whip a Roman citizen who hasn't even been tried? When the officer heard this, he went to the commander and said, What are you doing? This man is a Roman citizen. So the commander went over and asked Paul, Tell me, are you a Roman citizen? Yes, I certainly am, Paul replied. I am too, the commander muttered, and it costs me plenty. Paul said, But I am a citizen by birth. The soldiers who were about to interrogate Paul quickly withdrew when they heard he was a Roman citizen, and the commander was frightened because he had ordered him bound and whipped. The next day, the commander ordered the leading priests into session with the Jewish High Council. He wanted to find out what the trouble was all about, so he released Paul to have him stand before them. The things the Apostle Paul went through for the name of Jesus and his church. Welcome on into the Bible Hour. We have been seamlessly streaming since 9 o'clock. No problems. Easy stuff. Welcome on in. Sue Roberts, we all loved Car Park Communion. Thanks so much for having the vision. Glory. Paula Barrett, back to basics. Let's just read the Bible. Going to miss Car Park Communion. Hey, if we get kicked out of the building, maybe we'll spend the whole winter in the car park. The standing up for Jesus in front of your friends, or even how to talk to Jesus about your friends. I uploaded a little clip today on YouTube or Facebook and Twitter. If you want to recheck that, it was from a few weeks ago in Bible Hour. Like how to share Jesus. Not so much your faith, because our faith is a bit weak. Don't bother sharing that. Share Jesus, but how? That's up to date. Acts 23. Gazing intently at the high council, Paul began, Brothers, I have always lived before God with a clear conscience. Instantly, Ananias the high priest commanded those close to Paul to slap him on the mouth. But Paul said to him, God will slap you, you corrupt hypocrite. What kind of judge are you to break the law yourself by ordering me struck like that? Those standing near Paul said to him, Do you dare insult God's high priest? I'm sorry, brothers. I didn't realize he was the high priest, Paul replied. For the scriptures say, you must not speak evil of any of your rulers. Sue Rose, why would he get kicked out of the bill? Just in case the lockdown thing means we can't meet, you know. See if it tightens up a bit. I saw a funny tweet today. It was a mother of a 6-year-old saying, My daughter's devastated because as of tomorrow at 6 p.m, we're not allowed to have her 6th birthday party in the garden with her school friends. A handful of our school friends. But thankfully, we've booked out the local pub, and as long as we're gone by 10, we can have hundreds of people. Paul realized that some members of the high council were Sadducees and some were Pharisees, so he shouted, Brothers, I am a Pharisee, as were my ancestors, and I am on trial because my hope is in the resurrection of the dead. This divided the council, the Pharisees against the Sadducees, for the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, or angels, or spirits, but the Pharisees believe in all of these. So there was great uproar. Some of the teachers of religious law who were Pharisees jumped up and began to argue forcefully. "We see nothing wrong with him," they shouted. "Perhaps a spirit or an angel spoke to him." As the conflict grew more violent, the commander was afraid they would tear Paul apart. So he ordered his soldiers to go and rescue him by force and take him back to the fortress. I mean, this isn't mere nostalgic fiction here. Imagine people wanting to tear you apart. I'm going to experience that a bit later with Neil, but imagine it like a mob of people actually wanting to tear you apart. That night the Lord appeared to Paul and said, "Be encouraged, Paul. Just as you have been a witness to me here in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well." The next morning, a group of Jews got together and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 of them in the conspiracy. They went to the leading priests and elders and told them, "We have bound ourselves with an oath to eat nothing until we have killed Paul. So you and the high council should ask the commander to bring Paul back to the council again. Pretend you want to examine his case more fully, and we will kill him on the way." But Paul's nephew, his sister's son, heard of their plan and went to the fortress and told Paul. Paul called for one of the Roman officers and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something important to tell him." So the officer did, explaining, "Paul the prisoner called me over and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took his hand, led him aside and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" Paul's nephew told him, "Some Jews are going to ask you to bring Paul before the high council tomorrow, pretending they want to get some more information. But don't do it. There are more than 40 men hiding along the way, ready to ambush him. They have vowed not to eat or drink anything until they have killed him. They are ready now, just waiting for your consent. Don't let anyone know you told me this," the commander warned the young man. Ladies and gentlemen, it only seems like 15 minutes for some reason. I'm not sure why, but we are at the halfway mark. So go take 146 seconds. I wouldn't check your phones if you were me. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm just going to sit here and hide quietly. And we will see you after you take a little break. Chat. North Star Church is still not meeting in New Zealand. North Star, the church in a weird way is taken out of the world, yet not. Well, this is the thing. It's kicking off at the moment because churches are becoming divided now. A couple of bigwigs in America saying our churches are meeting now whatever you say because we obey the Lord and not government. Well, of course, that's true and yet is not true. Well, it is entirely true, but we're also told to obey the government until there's a conflict with the Lord's will. And so the argument for ignoring government and doing the Lord's will is that church serves a much greater purpose than mere physical health. And that is, we need to stay open and preach the gospel because people are dying in their sins, which is infinitely worse than getting COVID-19. So who's going to hear the message of all messages? So we're staying open. So that's the case. The other case is we can still get the message out even if we're locked down, so we'll do what the government say. It's a tricky one, folks. Nick Hawkins, happy to see you all. I'm glad you're happy. It's not been an easy ride this evening, Nick Hawkins. I might have to hide behind you tomorrow in church. A mob like Neil and Disney. Play Disney again, I dare you. Who is that pesky admin? Park End, there has been a tide change in Dad and family. They are now able to focus on the other side of surgery. Hope is here. Alright folks, in 20 seconds we will be carrying on the book of Acts. Here we go. Verse 23. Then the commander called 2 of his officers and ordered, "Get 200 soldiers ready to leave for Caesarea at 9 o'clock tonight. Also, take 200 spearmen and 70 mounted troops. Provide horses for Paul to ride and get him safely to Governor Felix." Then he wrote this letter to the governor. From Claudius Lysias to His Excellency, Governor Felix. Greetings. This man was seized by some Jews, and they are about to kill him when I arrived with the troops. When I learned that he was a Roman citizen, I removed him to safety. Then I took him to their high council to try and learn the basis of the accusations against him. I soon discovered the charge was something regarding their religious law. Certainly nothing worthy of imprisonment or death. But when I was informed of a plot to kill him, I immediately sent him on to you. I have told his accusers to bring their charges before you. So that night, as ordered, the soldiers took Paul as far as Antipatris. They returned to the fortress the next morning, while the mounted troops took him on to Caesarea. When they arrived in Caesarea, they presented Paul and the letter to Governor Felix. He read it and then asked Paul what province he was from. "Cilicia," Paul answered. "I will hear your case myself when your accusers arrive," the governor told him. Then the governor ordered him kept in the prison at Herod's headquarters. Or you might have Praetorium there. Now the next 2 chapters are quite powerful stuff. If you've ever seen people hear the gospel and then just reject it or put it on hold, these chapters now are a real warning against that. Jesus says, just come today. Don't wait till you feel like it, just come. "5 days later, Ananias, the high priest, arrived with some of the Jewish elders and the lawyer, Tertullus, to present their case against Paul to the governor. When Paul was called in, Tertullus presented the charges against Paul in the following address to the governor. "You have provided a long period of peace for us Jews, and with foresight have enacted reforms for us. For all of this, Your Excellency, we are very grateful to you. But I don't want to bore you, so please give me your attention for only a moment. We have found this man to be a troublemaker who is constantly stirring up riots among Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the cult known as the Nazarenes." Love it. "Furthermore, he was trying to desecrate the temple when we arrested him. You can find out the truth of our accusations by examining him yourself." Then the other Jews chimed in, declaring everything Tertullus said was true. The governor then motioned for Paul to speak. Paul said, "I know, sir, that you have been a judge of Jewish affairs for many years, so I gladly present my defense before you. You can quickly discover that I arrived in Jerusalem no more than 12 days ago to worship at the temple. My accusers never found me arguing with anyone in the temple, nor stirring up a riot in any synagogue or on the streets of the city. These men cannot prove the things they accuse me of doing. But I admit that I follow the way, which they call a cult. I worship the God of our ancestors, and I firmly believe the Jewish law and everything written in the prophets. I have the same hope in God that these men have, that he will raise both the righteous and the unrighteous. Because of this, I always try to maintain a clear conscience before God and all the people." After several years away, I returned to Jerusalem with money to aid my people and to offer sacrifices to God. My accusers saw me in the temple as I was completing a purification ceremony. There was no crowd around me and no rioting, but some Jews from the province of Asia were there, and they ought to be here to bring charges if they have anything against me. Ask these men here what crime the Jewish High Council found me guilty of, except for the one time I shouted, "I am in trial before you today because I believe in the resurrection of the dead." At that point, Felix, who was quite familiar with the way, adjourned the hearing and said, "Wait until Lysias, the garrison commander, arrives. Then I will decide the case." He ordered an officer to keep Paul in custody, but to give him some freedom and allow his friends to visit him and take care of his needs. A few days later, Felix came back with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish. Sending for Paul, they listened as he told them about faith in Christ Jesus. As he reasoned with them about righteousness and self-control and the coming day of judgment, Felix became frightened. "Go away for now," he replied. "When it is more convenient, I'll call for you again." He also hoped that Paul would bribe him, so he sent for him quite often and talked with him. After 2 years went by in this way, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus. And because Felix wanted to gain favor with the Jewish people, he left Paul in prison. So Paul reasoned with them about righteousness and self-control and the coming day of judgment, and Felix trembled. He trembled. "Go away for now, and when it's more convenient, I'll talk to you about this stuff again." And that's it. Probably lived and died waiting for bribes instead. What a warning. If you tarry till you're better, you will never come at all. Come without money to Jesus Christ and live. He is able. 3 days after Festus, so from Felix to Festus, arrived in Caesarea to take over his new responsibilities, he left for Jerusalem, where the leading priests and other Jewish leaders met with him and made their accusations against Paul. They asked Festus as a favor to transfer Paul to Jerusalem, planning to ambush and kill him on the way. But Festus replied that Paul was at Caesarea and he himself would be returning there soon. So he said, "Those of you in authority can return with me. If Paul has done anything wrong, you can make your accusations." About 8 or 10 days later, Festus returned to Caesarea, and on the following day, he took his seat in court and ordered that Paul be brought in. When Paul arrived, the Jewish leaders from Jerusalem gathered around and made many serious accusations they couldn't prove. Paul denied the charges. I am not guilty of any crime against the Jewish law or the temple or the Roman government, he said. Then Festus, wanting to please the Jews, asked him, "Are you willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there?" There's so much deadly people-pleasing in the Bible. Ladies and gentlemen, don't live for pleasing people. It's an exhausting route, and it quickly fizzles out. And you really have to keep that up constantly to an exhausting level to get your sense of satisfaction from it. It's a horrible God, the one of people-pleasing. The fear of man bringeth a snare. But Paul replied, "No, this is the official Roman court, so I ought to be tried right here. You know very well that I am not guilty of harming the Jews. If I have done something worthy of death, I don't refuse to die. But if I am innocent, no one has a right to turn me over to these men to kill me. I appeal to Caesar." Festus conferred with his advisers and then replied, "Very well, you have appealed to Caesar, and to Caesar you will go." A few days later, King Agrippa arrived with his sister Bernice. You may have... yeah, you've probably got Bernice. To pay their respects to Festus. During their stay of several days, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. "There is a prisoner here," he told him, "whose case was left for me by Felix. When I was in Jerusalem, the leading priests and Jewish elders pressed charges against him and asked me to condemn him. I pointed out to them that Roman law does not convict people without a trial. They must be given an opportunity to confront their accusers and defend themselves. When his accusers came here for the trial, I didn't delay. I called the case for the next day and ordered Paul brought in. But the accusations made against him weren't any of the crimes I expected. Instead, it was something about their religious and a dead man named Jesus, who Paul insists is alive. I was at a loss to know how to investigate these things, so I asked him whether he would be willing to stand on trial on these charges in Jerusalem. But Paul appealed to have his case decided by the emperor. So I ordered that he be held in custody until I could arrange to send him to Caesar. "I'd like to hear the man myself," Agrippa said. And Festus replied, "You will, tomorrow." So the next day, Agrippa and Bernice arrived at the auditorium with a great pomp, accompanied by military officers and prominent men of the city. Festus ordered that Paul be brought in. Then Festus said, "King Agrippa and all who are here, this is the man whose death is demanded by all the Jews, both here and in Jerusalem. But in my opinion, he has done nothing deserving death. However, since he appealed his case to the emperor, I have decided to send him to Rome." Now this should be resonating with another fake trial with mob mentality. And tomorrow in church, if I make it, we'll be hearing about an apprentice of the Apostle John who was taken up by mob mentality. But what shall I write the emperor? For there is no clear charge against him. So I have brought him before all of you, and especially you, King Agrippa, so that after we examine him, I might have something to write. For it makes no sense to send a prisoner to the emperor without specifying the charges against him. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the 4th. Take 30 seconds, go grab a glass of milk and come on back. Paul against Agrippa. So if you want to do extra homework, the last letter Paul wrote, I think is, well, in the scriptures, is to Timothy. And there's quite some moving stuff there when you realise he's really late on in his life there. He says some quite moving stuff. Acts 26. Then Agrippa said to Paul, "You may speak in your defence." So Paul, gesturing with his hand, started his defence. "I am fortunate, King Agrippa, that you are the one hearing my defence today against all these accusations made by the Jewish leaders, for I know you are an expert on all Jewish customs and controversies. Now please listen to me patiently. As the Jewish leaders are well aware, I was given a thorough Jewish training from my earliest childhood among my own people and in Jerusalem. If they would admit it, they know that I have been a member of the Pharisees, the strictest sect of our religion. Now I am on trial because my hope in the fulfillment of God's promise made to our ancestors. In fact, that is why the 12 tribes of Israel zealously worship God night and day, and they share the same hope I have. Yet, Your Majesty, they accuse me of having this hope. For having this hope, sorry. Not of having this hope. For, because of it. Why does it seem incredible to any of you that God can raise the dead? I used to believe that I ought to do everything I could to oppose the very name of Jesus the Nazarene. Indeed, I did just that in Jerusalem. Authorized by the leading priests, I caused many believers there to be sent to prison, and I cast my vote against them when they were condemned to death. Many times I had them punished in the synagogues to get them to curse Jesus. I was so violently opposed to them and even chased them down in foreign cities. One day I was on such a mission to Damascus, armed with the authority and commission of the leading priests, about noon, Your Majesty. As I was on the road, a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shone down on me and my companions. We all fell down, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is useless for you to fight against my will." You probably have there, some of you, it's hard for you to kick against the goads or ox goads. "Who are you, Lord?" I asked. And the Lord replied, "I am Jesus, the one you are persecuting. Now get to your feet, for I have appeared to you to appoint you as my servant and witness. Tell people that you have seen me, and tell them what I will show you in the future. And I will rescue you from both your own people and the Gentiles. Yes, I am sending you to the Gentiles to open their eyes, so they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God. Then they will receive forgiveness for their sins and be given a place among God's people who are set apart by faith in me." And so, King Agrippa, I obeyed that vision from heaven. I preached first to those in Damascus, then in Jerusalem, and throughout all Judea, and also to the Gentiles, that all must repent of their sins and return to God, and prove they have changed by the good things they do. Some Jews arrested me in the temple for preaching this, and they tried to kill me. But God has protected me right up to this present time, so I can testify to everyone, from the least to the greatest. I teach nothing except what the prophets and Moses said would happen. That the Messiah would suffer and be the first to rise from the dead, and in this way announce God's light to the Jews and Gentiles alike. What do you mean? Moses and the prophets spoke about the Messiah? And Paul is saying nothing more. Suddenly, Festus shouted, "Paul, you are insane. Too much study has made you crazy." But Paul replied, "I'm not insane, most excellent Festus. What I am saying is the sober truth. And King Agrippa knows about these things. I speak boldly, for I am sure these events are all familiar to him, for they were not done in a corner." King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do. Agrippa interrupted him. Do you think you can persuade me to become a Christian so quickly? Or you might have in your versions a little more, and your arguments would make me a Christian. KJV has it something like, you almost persuaded me. Admin, could we have that in the KJV? I think it's really powerfully put there. It's something like, you almost persuaded me, which is really tragic. Paul replied, "Whether quickly or not, I pray to God that both you and everyone here in this audience might become the same as I am, except for these chains." Then the king, the governor, Bernice, and all others stood and left. As they went out, they talked it over and agreed, this man hasn't done anything to deserve death or imprisonment. And Agrippa said to Festus, he could have been set free if he hadn't appealed to Caesar. So there he is, but before Felix, Festus, and Agrippa. And they doth almost persuade him. No, he doth almost persuade them. All right, folks, here we go. 27 KJV. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. Isn't that just like a frightening thing? Almost. As he just stands on a precipice over eternity with no second chance. When the time came, we set sail for Italy. Paul and several other prisoners were placed in the custody of a Roman officer named Julius, a captain of the imperial regiment. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was also with us. We left on a ship whose home port was Adramyttium on the northwest coast of the province of Asia. It was scheduled to make several stops at ports along the coast of the province. The next day, when we docked at Sidon, Julius was very kind to Paul and let him go ashore to visit with friends so they could provide for his needs. Putting out to sea from there, we encountered strong headwinds that made it difficult to keep the ship on course. So we sailed north of Cyprus between the island and the mainland. Keeping to the open sea, we passed along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, landing at Myra in the province of Lycia. There the commanding officer found an Egyptian ship from Alexandria that was bound for Italy, and he put us on board. We had several days of slow sailing, and after great difficulty, we finally neared Cnidus. But the wind was against us, so we sailed across to Crete and along the sheltered coast of the island, past the Cape of Salmone. We struggled along the coast with great difficulty and finally arrived at fair havens near the town of Lasea. We had lost a lot of time. The weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel because it was so late in the fall, and Paul spoke to the ship's officers about it. Men, he said, now this is really interesting. I believe there is trouble ahead if we go on. Shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well. But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than to Paul. And since Fair Havens was an exposed harbour, a poor place to spend the winter, most of the crew wanted to go on to Phoenix, farther up the coast of Crete, and spend the winter there. Phoenix was a good harbour with only a southwest and a northwest exposure. I'll explain why it's interesting in a few moments. When a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought they could make it. So they pulled up anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, and a wind of typhoon strength, called a northeaster, burst across the island and blew us out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. We sailed along the sheltered side of a small island named Corda, or Clauda in some manuscripts, where with great difficulty we hoisted aboard the lifeboat being towed behind us. Then the sailors bound ropes around the hull of the ship to strengthen it. They were afraid of being driven across to the sandbars of Syrtis off the African coast, so they lowered the sea anchor to slow the ship and were driven before the wind. The next day, as gale-force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars, until, at last, all hope was gone. No one had eaten for a long time. Finally, Paul called the crew together and said, "Men, you should have listened to me in the first place and not left Crete. You had avoided all of this damage and loss. But take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. For last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, 'Don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe in God. It will be just as he said. But we will be shipwrecked on an island.'" So I'll tie off why I said, remember that thing he said. I'll tie that off tomorrow. What we'll close is with this. Paul's facing death. He's now facing terrible storms and shipwrecks. And it's all for Jesus. And he's in glory now and will be forevermore. Our worst day is not the last day with this Christian faith of ours. And do not be like Felix, Festus, and Agrippa, who heard but hardened themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got an action-packed day for you tomorrow. We are looking at the word of the priest, the place of the words of the Lord in the life of the church at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Join us. And God willing, we'll be back here at 9 p.m. tomorrow for day 146. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to